Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you as ever for stopping by. I'd like to thank Catherine Colleen for the invitation last night to have dinner in honour of Roxanne de Bilderling, who was the Belgian ambassador to Kenya and a friend, and it was really great to catch up. She's now somewhere by the sea in one of my favourite places in Kenya, which is on the south coast. Macro thoughts: Bitcoin soars past 14,000, up more than 40% this month. A Bitcoin frenzy like no other is gripping South Korea. US 2s, 10s, and German Bunds 2s versus 10s is seen in this from Holger. And this narrowing in the 2s 10s spread in the US is causing a lot of concern, and typically is an indicator of a recession on the horizon. But in this case, I don't feel it is. December in California, this is by Yam Photos, very dramatic indeed, isn't it? Rare skeleton shown of human ancestor, 3.6 million years old. Researchers in South Africa have unveiled what they call by far the most complete skeleton of a human ancestor older than 1.5 million years ever found. University of Witwatersrand displayed the virtually complete Australopithecus fossil on Wednesday. The skeleton dates back 3.6 million years. Its discovery is expected to help researchers better understand the human ancestors' appearance and movement. Incredible to sort of go into virtual reality and live that life that individual lived. Africa will write its own history, and it will be to the north and to the south of the Sahara a history of glory and dignity. Grevy's zebras have undergone one of the most substantial reductions of range of any African mammal, AWF. I like this quote from Gary V. "Your victories and happiness don't take away from me, they add to it." This is a photograph I like from Magnum Photos, which is a nice handle to follow. And this too of Indira Gandhi is captured by Magnum photographers over nearly 4 decades ago. Political Reflections Time magazine gives its Person of the Year award to the Silence Breakers, representing people who came forward to report sexual misconduct. And then there's an explanation by them for giving voice to open secrets, for moving whisper networks onto social networks, for pushing us all to stop accepting the unacceptable. The silence breakers of the 2017 Person of the Year, well deserved indeed. North Korea Foreign Ministry spokesman says remaining question is when will the war break out? Last few days, the language coming out from both sides speaks to a kind of inevitable train motion towards a train wreck. Now, White House officials think Donald Trump's decision to follow through on his campaign promise strengthens his credibility around the world. Even if only partially, strengthens his credibility around the world as someone who stands by his word. This is a cartoon from Latouf. The Pope spoke out against plans to change Jerusalem's status. "I cannot hide my deep concern for the situation that has been created in the last few days. And at the same time, I offer a heartfelt appeal for the commitment of all to respect the status quo of the city in conformity with the pertinent UN resolutions. Jerusalem is a unique city which is sacred for Jews, Christians, and Muslims who venerate the holy sites of their respective religions and has a special vocation for peace," he added. The Pope, who spoke to Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader, also said he prayed for wisdom and prudence to prevail in order to avoid new elements of tension in the a world already convulsed and marked by some many cruel conflicts. Shahabi Fares, who I follow on Twitter, posted this photograph. First Lady being received in Saudi Arabia. Asia Time Zone Online is saying the Black Sea has been turned into a Russian lake. Recent severe earthquake in Iran near the Iraqi border reminded the world that the Middle East is subject to physical upheavals, as if to mimic nature, geopolitical and social upheavals are following at a dizzying pace. Saying the first was the unwise referendum on independence in Iraqi Kurdistan, secondly the precipitous decline of US influence and the simultaneous rise of Russian influence in the region. Russia has dreamed of and plotted and fought for a position in the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries. It now, for the first time in history, has it. The Black Sea has been turned into a Russian lake. Bits of Georgia and Ukraine have been taken over, including the highly strategic Crimean Peninsula. Turkey has been thoroughly cowed, and Russia has triumphantly entered the Eastern Mediterranean with naval and air bases and a vigorous and successful intervention in the Syrian civil war on the side of Assad. Russian hegemony has been symbolized by successive meetings by Putin with Assad. That hug was a big indicator. Rouhani and Erdogan symbolically held not in Moscow but in Sochi on the Black Sea. In the meantime, preoccupied with the North Korean threat, the US continues its military slog through the morass of Afghanistan and Iraq, although it is entirely unlikely what it hopes to achieve in either country. Then finally, the astonishing developments in Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince is simultaneously consolidating his own branch of the Al Saud tribal complex, conducting an anti-corruption campaign resulting in the arrest of dozens of princes and businessmen, liberalizing the medieval Wahhabi sect of Sunni Islam, planning hyper-ambitious plans, and now the unconformed report in the New York Times that the Saudis have devised a truly workable Israeli-Palestinian peace plan and given Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas 2 months to approve it or resign. As if that were not enough, MBS, who is also Minister of Defense, is conducting a war in the Yemen, a diplomatic, political, economic boycott of Qatar in association with Bahrain, the UAE and Egypt. This is an agenda that is beyond daunting and is a multi-pronged attempt to confront Iran and its terrorist proxies and assure the continuing stability and prosperity of a new Saudi Arabia. Then he's saying the one thing we know nothing about is the future, but with the new developments added to the already toxic brew in the Middle East since the so-called Arab Spring, prediction is rendered all but impossible. Even the greatest of the biblical prophets would quail at proclaiming what is going to take place, although the book of Ezequiel comes uncomfortably close. I went and read a little bit of the book of Ezequiel myself after reading that. It's unlikely Trump would have followed through if the Saudis had drawn something resembling a red line, so to speak, says Shadi Hamid. It appears that the Saudi regime have done the opposite. The New York Times reported, according to Palestinian, Arab and European officials who have heard Mr. Abbas's version of the conversation, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman presented a plan that would be more tilted towards the Israelis than any ever embraced by the American government. Whether or not the Saudi prince presented this plan out of sincerity or as a gambit to lower the bar and pressure Palestinian Mahmoud Abbas to make concessions is almost beside the point. Which is the point. And that, going back to November when I was writing about the Crown Prince, I said, in all the history books I've read, it's probably wisest to operate on one front, not two, and certainly not three. And I call it an unprecedented moment in the history of the kingdom and the most perilous moment for the House of Saud that I can recall. And I think taking on Iran in this very frontal fashion is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Bloomberg is saying, are Saudi arrests a crackdown, a shakedown, or a purge? I was talking again in November about how we were going to see a massive, I said, $1 trillion disgorge right here. Discussing the tremendous momentum of the relations between Africa and Israel and ways to further strengthen them, this is Benjamin Netanyahu's Twitter feed. He met with all the African ambassadors, a lot of votes in Africa. Today I crossed the border from India to Pakistan on foot, becoming the first British politician to make this journey in recent history. It's the Mayor of London. Brexit, May has 3 choices, all of which break her. David Davis, evolving thoughts on when an impact assessment isn't an impact assessment. Take a look at that. Currency markets, last time I looked, euro dollar below 118, 117.96, dollar index back above 93.50 at 93.56, Japanese yen 112.42, Swiss franc 0.9897, the pound 133.75, the Aussies had a tough time below 0.7550, India rupee 64.545, South Korean won 1091.54, Rial 323.57, Egyptian pound 17.791, South African rand 13.5393. Dollar index above that key level of 93.50 that I've previously spoken about. Euro dollar softening up 117.96. In November, I said I expect the spot crude oil market reprices further to run, and this will lift Brent crude over $70 a barrel. This is a chart from Javier Blas, and we've had a bit of a retracement yesterday. Gold, it's been soft, everyone's talking it lower, 1263. MSCI Emerging Market Index is starting to reverse course. Gauge is down about 5% since reaching a 6-year high in late November. Sub-Saharan Africa, for the 2nd year running, Congo is the country worst affected by conflict displacement in the world, said Ulrika Blom, the Norwegian Refugee Council's Congo director. It's a mega crisis. The scale of people fleeing violence is off the charts. And it doesn't get any of the publicity places like Syria are getting. Angola's $1.5 billion of bonds due in 2025 have returned 8.1% since Lourenço was sworn in as president on September the 26th. The market likes what he's doing, and you're getting a sharp reduction in political risk. They put up interest rates 200 basis points last week, trying to bring inflation under control. While one could point to market ebullience due to elevated oil prices as a factor underpinning these bonds, the market might be getting more constructive on the policy outlook, definitely. It took just 50 days into the new administration for the former president's daughter to be replaced as boss of Sonangol. That was the early signal in the noise. Evidence that Ethiopia is spying on journalists shows commercial spyware is out of control, saying behind a sophisticated international spying operation was one of the poorest countries in the world, a country where less than 5% of the population had access to the internet, a country run by an autocratic government routinely flagged for human rights abuses and corruption. Behind this operation was Ethiopia. October 2016, I was talking about how the government need to change tack and effect a course correction, less repression. And I says history shows us that this course correction is one of the most difficult things to pull off. African court rules Rwandan opposition leaders' rights have been violated. Lawyers representing a Rwandan opposition leader for 15 years. Look at the photograph. They shaved her eyebrows. For 15 years, intend to seek reparations from the government after a Pan-African court ruled her rights had been violated during the trial. Procedural rights do not exist for those who are political opponents and who are seen as a threat to the regime. She was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison, which was increased to 15 years on appeal. The court based in Tanzania did not order Ingabira's release, but gave the Rwandan government 6 months to rectify harm done. African court didn't impose specific measures, but the government cannot just ignore the ruling. Ms. Buisman said she did not understand why Mr. Kagame, who won re-election this year with 98% of the vote, treats his opponents this way, considering his popularity. He probably, certainly, had won re-election easily enough on both occasions, she said. I think paranoia got to his head, and he's used to running the country by absolute power, by fear. So he doesn't know any other way, she said. What a view from Table Mountain, so blessed is our city. It is a wonderful city. Steinhoff bonds in free fall yesterday. Steinhoff was rocked as its CEO, Justin, quits over accounting wrongdoing. Steinhoff plunged after its CEO resigned amid accounting irregularities and a reversal of fortune for a South African billionaire who upended the retail industry in Africa and Europe via a series of acquisitions. This is Christo Visa. Where does Steinhoff accounting scandal leave the billionaire Visa? It's quite a fall. So quite a lot of drama and extraordinary fall. The European Commercial Bank has been buying these bonds. Steinhoff 2025 bond. So it shows you the perils of this QE program when you end up buying all the junk. And then this is quite a fall. South Africa's economy will be 20% smaller next year in dollars than it was in 2011, according to Bank of America. South African all share corrected 1.64% lower. This is all about Steinhoff. It's up 14.52% year to date. Dollar versus Rand around the 1350 level, just above it. We think this is beautiful, and you, this is Lagos plays polo, photograph from Renaissance capital. Nigerians drink more Guinness than the Irish. 40% of the Irish beer consumed is sold in Africa, says a report. Nigeria's top Guinness drinking country, Cameroon, with no Irish population, is fourth, ahead of the US with its huge Irish community. Every day, over 10 million glasses of Guinness are being enjoyed around the world, and every year, more than 1.8 billion pints are being sold. Nigerian all shares up 45.4% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 48.87% year to date. The US is urging opposition leaders to work within Kenya's laws to pursue the reforms they seek and to avoid extra-constitutional actions such as the proposed inauguration ceremony on December the 12th. And my conclusions of this, let's be frank, the opposition's asymmetric strategy was effective, but now it's hit the end of the road. And these type of hijinks are simply political farce. You know, my question is, where's the beef? Where's the strategy? Where's the agenda for job creation? It's an old narrative. It's something that Emmanuel Macron was touching on in his visits to Kenya, to Africa. The page is being turned. We need to set a new narrative. And the opposition, most of all, is down a political cul-de-sac. Tom Maboya Mausoleum. This is from Dala Adventures. My piece in August was about finding the off-ramp in the Kenyan economy. And with good reason, the World Bank has now downgraded Kenya's economic outlook and warned of significant downside risks that could scuttle the projected rebound. Downgraded growth forecast for the year from 5.5 to 4.9%, its slowest in 5 years. This is weaker than the government expected, but more optimistic than most economists. The bank forecasts it could rebound to 5.5 to 5.8% in the next 2 years. But it warned that lingering political uncertainty can undermine business confidence and stunt a robust recovery. Removing the rate cap quickly will be critical to preserving medium-term growth prospects. The problem is the removal is a political thing in the parliament. Patrick Njoroge has also called for the cap to be scrapped. On government spending, Mr. Dennis said there was certainly scope for improvements in efficiency. He said the government spends almost half its revenue paying civil servants and legislators compared with a global average of 30% for middle-income nations. Razia Khan forecast growth will be 4.5% this year and 4.6% next year. Private sector growth is key to Kenya's economic recovery. Um, that is the headline of the World Bank report. Agriculture, a major source of employment, largest single economic sector, accounting for 25% of GDP, roughly 50% of export revenue. Drought has a huge impact on Kenya's economy. Farming is largely rain-fed. This is actually across the continent. You get agriculture right, you get a lot right. And